And he said this dude stood up in the back and he goes, "Mother effer, I want my money back."
Welcome. You're listening to PaleoCheeze Podcast, Episode 5, a double feature with Unicorn City and The Visitor.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Chad Lutsky.
And I'm Jeremiah Bannister.
And you're listening to PaleoCheeze Podcast, the podcast that tosses film onto the cheese lounge to discuss, psychoanalyze, and sometimes even point and laugh at. Today, we got a double feature.
Yeah, man.
A couple of films that, one in particular, probably not many people have seen.
Actually, both of them, a lot of people may not have ever seen.
Yeah,
it's a good possibility, man.
This is true, man. One's called The Visitor from '79, and the other one is Unicorn City from, was it 2012? Yeah. And two completely different genres, different styles, and they're not 5 stars.
Yeah, they're not 5 stars.
Just so you know that we don't give everything a 4.82 or whatever you gave it last time. 4.827, I think is what it was. Yeah, something like that. Right. I got pretty deep with the decimal. All right, so let's just start with our usual discussion, what we've been watching, what we've been reading. Mm-hmm. Anything in particular other than books on symbols and Dante?
Books on symbols and Dante. Yes. Well, I've been reading this. I've been going through the whole Lynch on Lynch book, and edited by Chris Rodley. I've been going through that bit by bit, where he talks about different movies that he'd done or portions of his life, and it was really cool reading about his household and his upbringing, and then to read about his love for painting and art. But I read and I finished not too long ago, and I need to read it again. It's one of these books that you read through, and it's kind of mind-blowing, actually. It's called Lord of the World by Robert Hugh Benson. Let me see if I can get this on the camera. Anyway, yeah, Robert Hugh Benson. I believe he was a Monsignor, actually. I was going through, looking it up. It says that Wikipedia, Lord of the World is a 1907 dystopian science fiction novel by Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson that centers on the reign of the Antichrist and the end of the world. It's been called prophetic by a number of people, including the current Pope Francis, as well as the Pope prior to him, Benedict XVI. It's a lot different than a lot of the modern stories that involve Antichrist. Whether they be from a perspective that's not necessarily trying to be true to form of the Bible, or people who are trying, but are kind of taking it from a dispensational perspective, like Left Behind series, or what was the Thief in the Night, with the charts. I think on the 3rd or 4th episode of that, the part 4, there was a 10-minute long sequence of a guy with a chalkboard talking, about showing about the timeline of everything for the doctrine. And so it's not that. And it's amazing though, because it's the way that it talks about the way that people were brought into his world and how it became a religion, in fact, a political religion, and it became something to be enforced. The way they changed even calendars and holy days, and they mimicked popular religious custom and tradition. It's a fascinating book, and the way it ends, I don't want to give too much away about what it was and why, because people can speculate as to why it would end that way. So I don't want to say too much about it, but it was the kind of thing that when it was over, you get so pumped about it, and then this happens, and you're like, man, I gotta read this again. I actually have to go through this to understand this again. And there's a really powerful scene in there about euthanasia, where there's a girl who euthanizes herself, and the way that euthanasia is kind of brought in, and the way that people talk about life and death in this new world. And she goes through it, and I rarely ever cry when reading a book. I mean, that's a rare thing for me. I haven't had that very often. Right. But man, I cried. And it was just a powerful thing because of the way that it built up and the way that it was experienced and the way that she reacted once the process began. And it was gripping. It's like Paddleton, to be honest.
Yeah.
That moment.
Right.
That moment and the thoughts going through, but she was alone. And so for people who don't know what we mean by Paddleton, you got to go back and listen. It's episode 2. So, yeah. But that's what I've been reading that. I've been reading the whole Lynch on Lynch thing, which is totally awesome. Been reading that James Monaco, How to Read a Film. I've been reading that. So I've been reading a whole bunch of stuff, man. But what have you been reading, Chad?
Well, you know, when we had Josh Mallerman on last week, he offered me a PDF of Mallory, which I kind of felt like an a-hole for kind of turning it down because of possible small print. Because the last time I tried to read a PDF on my Kindle, I didn't do it. I gave up. So I crawled back to Josh and I was like, dude, you know, yeah, can you hook me up? So he sent me a set on my Kindle.
I was wondering about that, man. And people, they need to go back because that's a moment in time where my eyeballs like popped out of my head. I don't know if people remember that whole Pee-wee's Big Adventure where he's talking to the large Marge, and she's like, in her face look like this, and it's that claymation face where her eyeballs go, you know, popping out. That's what my eyes were like, man. When you were like, I don't know, you know, PDF, I'm not sure, Mr. Mallerman. Don't need to listen. Don't need to read that. I'm like thinking, are you kidding? I was like, dude, hook me up. I'll read that.
I kind of felt like a jerk, but but Josh is such a nice guy. I'm sure that he didn't, you know, he seemed to understand that. And I won't read a book at my computer. My day job, I work at my computer all day, and then I'm a writer. So I'll write at my computer and do all my marketing at my computer and everything. The last thing I want to do is read a book at the computer, staring at the same screen. So, but I remembered I have a Paperwhite Kindle, which are great, especially if you're in bed reading and your wife doesn't want a light on, or if you're outside reading and you don't have to worry about glare and stuff. They're really good if you're just going to read a book, but not so much for PDFs. And I remember my wife has a Kindle Fire. It has a much larger screen, and you can mess with the font more and the font size and stuff. You can mess with the font size in Paperwhite, but not necessarily with a PDF. So it's just a lot trickier, and not a matter of just like flipping a page.
I have such a hard time with that, man.
Electronic reading?
Electronic reading, man. Like I know it sounds weird, but I'm confident that our listeners and that they're going to know what we're talking about. I love the smell of books.
Oh, dude, yes.
I get my face right in there, man.
It's the first thing I do when I order books in the mail. Very first thing I do.
Yes,
I love that so many different books have different smells, and they don't all smell the same. There's different types of papers that are used. So I can read a book and smell it. And like maybe it's a book that I read, 25 years ago, and I can pick up that smell, and it takes me back into some of the, even if it's a different book and it's kind of like the same, publisher, the same era or something, I can smell it and remind me of a book. But yeah, I love that they all smell good, and they all smell like, paper, but they don't all smell the same.
And I like to feel like there are some books, there's a book called Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads. He also wrote a book called The Wizard of Ads. That was his first book. And I've mentioned it before. It's a completely brilliant book, but in there, the paper itself, like I wish I knew what kind of stock it was, because it's got I've seen this with diaries, okay, where it's got kind of the edges that are they're not flush with each other, okay, on the binding. So like it's kind of almost as if they were torn.
Yeah, I can't remember what that's called, but I know what you're talking. The
style of that, and I love the feel of it. I love it as I'm turning the page. I love it kind of when you kind of flutter it like that. I just something about it, and I love, to be honest, I know a lot of people that they love hardcovers. And that may also be one of those things that if people are really into hardcovers, and I know maybe I'm talking out of my rear end on this, but I would wonder, I'd love to find out information about this, do a study or something, and ask people, the people who are really comfortable reading with electronic devices, were they preferable to hardcover or softcover, or were they indifferent? Because I'm preferable, curiously enough, to softcover. Like, I like softcover books. I don't have a lot of hardcover books. I know people who do, and that's the main way they like it. They're obviously more, they're special, you know, the longevity of them and everything else. But I like being able to just walk around and have that where you can bend it, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't like it creased. I don't like that, you know, but I like being able to bend. I like being able to, and if I have to, being able to put it in my pocket, like a novella, you know, my back pocket, I'm walking around, I'm outside. I'm old school like that, man. Dennis the Menace type stuff. You know, I don't have the slingshot. I've got the book instead. I've got a novella in place of a slingshot.
I like hardcovers on the shelf. And usually if I'm buying a book and the hardcover isn't expensive, it's affordable or used, I usually get that. But when it comes to actually reading them, I used to prefer hardcovers, but these days I think that I prefer the paperbacks. They're just easier to hold. They're less, because I read in bed. But I don't mind reading with a Kindle, but it's not something that I don't buy books usually on my Kindle. It's usually stuff that I'm either, you know, that are sent to me, or, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, so I just started Mallory today. Really excited about it. Love Josh's stuff. I haven't read, there's many of his books I haven't read. But I've read a couple short stories of his. We're actually in a couple anthologies together, and I read some of those short stories and stuff, which I have a bad habit of not reading for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm alone in this or what, but I have a bad habit of not normally reading the anthologies that I'm in. And I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's because I've got all these other books ahead in my TBR pile that I want to get to. And I don't know.
Speaking of books you're in and reading books and things like that, I know, you know, we talked about this before the show and you warned me, but I'm going to put it out there, man. If there are people who are listening or watching this show and they are writing books, you know, short books, long books, doesn't matter, and you enjoy the reviews that we do of movies, we really delve into movies more than books. We talk about the books that we're reading, you know, and we say a little bit about it, but we haven't done a deep dive into a book. We haven't collectively read a book together. You know what I mean? Although that might be kind of a cool thing, the PaleoCheeze book club or something, or movie club. But if you're writing a book, if you're an author, poet, if you write fiction, whatever you're writing, doesn't matter. And you say, hey, look, I would like it if you at least give it a shot. You know, I can't promise that, speaking for myself, I can't promise that I could read that very quickly. I've got a lot on my plate too. But, you know, I sat there and I was telling Chet, I said, over the years, a real blind spot for me, and it's a super bummer, is that I have this majestic, this totally epic library. And yet I have a very limited amount of fiction books. And almost all of mine, I used to always say that my best friends are dead people, you know, that I really enjoy the democracy of the dead. I love reading books by people who stopped breathing a long time ago, you know? So I read these classic books and stuff, Dante and Milton and Shakespeare and Homer and, you know, all that stuff. I love that. Okay. So I love poetry. I love myth. But I sat there and I said, man, I really need to read things that are more contemporary and get to know people who are writing contemporarily. Okay. And so make sure you can email us. And that's also applies for people who wish us to talk about different movies or any questions and comments you may have. You can go ahead and email us. It's really easy at paleocheeze@gmail.com. I just had to put that out there, Chad. I had to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then they can send you the books.
Yeah, they can send me the books, but yeah, I'll be bombarded. Yeah, I'll complain because I have so many. I'll be like, look, guys, it's getting real rough down here.
Or if you happen to be a filmmaker, like indie, I'm sure, and you're wanting to get any of your stuff reviewed, you know, you could send the stuff our way too. Yes. But be prepared for, you know, we don't go out of our way to try to be cruel. We understand that there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears behind you know, doing anything creatively. And so we don't want to deliberately poke fun, but you know, if your movie is an indie film and is subpar, it might get thrown on the chaise lounge and pointed at and laughed. And if you got thick skin and you can handle it, then go ahead. And I say that because 20 years ago, I had a magazine that I had started, and with a friend of mine, Joe Dewey, it got big, and I got a lot of bands and record companies sending me stuff for review, but I had some movie companies sending me stuff, including Troma, which I was a huge fan of at the time. And I had done an interview with Lloyd Kaufman, the co-creator of Troma, and who I'd love to get on here and talk with us, because I think that he would be hilarious and good to chat with. But anyway, Troma would send me promotional items and their films for review. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there, you know, since we're a kind of a film, but I love diving into book territory too. Mm-hmm. A lot of my peers, a lot of my friends are readers and writers. And I know that if they listen to the podcast and I'm sure when we do talk about books, they certainly probably appreciate those moments. So
it's put my feet to the fire, in fact, Chad.
Yeah.
You know, doing this show, man, it has, because now you got all these writers, man. Like, that's the main thing. You know, even though we talk about movies, a lot of the people, you know, that are kind of in the world of this are writers, people mm-hmm. writing books or people writing script or whatever. And I've done journalism. I've written a whole bunch of articles. I have some of my poetry published, but man, I've been working on this book now, and I'm almost done. I've only got a couple chapters left. And I'm to the point with this thing where I'm surrounded by people and they're all talking about books that they've done. And I'm like grinding my teeth thinking, come on, man. So it's putting my feet to the fire. And I've gone so far, man, as to seriously consider the whole Mallerman approach to his early work that said he locked himself in the door in a room. I think he had a bottle of liquor and said, I'm going to finish this bad boy. And I forget how many, it was at 10,000 pages or 10,000 words, 10,000 pages. Yeah. He wrote 10,000 pages in a couple of days. He was really trashed. He was on something amazing. But no, he wrote, it was like 10,000 words or something. It was a lot of a significant amount of material in only a weekend, I think. And I thought, and I said, you know, if I did 10,000, I'd be done.
Yeah. He was probably more than that. It's probably more than 10,000. I could see him pulling that off without being locked in, over a weekend.
Yeah. I was going to say, I thought it was only 2 days. Like, it was something short, whatever. It's on his documentary, but I thought about it and said, whatever it is. Right. So even for lowballing, and he's like, come on, guys, 10,000. Come on. I do that in my sleep. But if I was locked in a room for 2 days and I pumped out 10,000 words on this, bro, it would be sent off to an editor. And I had a friend of mine, he's actually published a number of books, and his are theological and stuff like that, philosophical, theological. So they're nonfiction, but he knows what my story is, what I'm working on, and he is going to get me in contact with a pretty decent publisher. So I have two decent publishers, man, that I'm getting the emails. I've already got an email for one of them to send direct to the editorial staff there, which is pretty amazing. I bypassed some certain people, a couple levels. And then this new one that just happened in the last couple days. And so it's actually been a really cool thing to be doing this on a bunch of levels. Not only that it's cool to be talking about movies and things like that, but also to just on a professional, a professional level, to say that it's been really encouraging to be seeing all the books and all the works that are done by people who are following what we're doing, and to hear their stories and to learn more about them and checking out their pages or their podcasts. And it's just been a really cool thing, really encouraging. So I want to thank everybody.
Yeah. You brought that up the other day, and you were talking about how inspired you were getting. And I've been thinking about it ever since. And I haven't mentioned anything to you, but, I don't know all of the avenues. I don't know, if somebody were to come to me, for example, and say, hey, I'm a romance writer, where should I head to get published and stuff like that? I mean, I could point them kind of in sort of certain directions. Like my sister, for example, she does poetry. If she did horror poetry, then I'd be able to hook her up and you know, be like, oh, this is, you know, you can submit here, sign up to this newsletter, get their notifications. They'll send you all kind of places that submit. But I'm not with that. That being said, I wish I knew as much about like journalistic type and freelance type stuff, because I think that you are missing out. I think that you are needed in several different areas.
Thank you.
And that you just you are more than capable. I think that's something that you should pursue. I think that it's a wasted talent.
Thank you.
Not using it.
No, I thank you for that, actually. Like, I mean it. And so people listening, look, I'm dead serious. I love writing. And if people are interested to know and to read some of my writing, to get a general idea for the style, for how I write. And, you know, because I'm a journalist, but I'm also a poet. I like prose. I like speculative fiction. In fact, that's what I got my award for in college when they published my work. I got the writing award for Olivet College. And so, you know, there are these things, but I never pursued it beyond just simply, well, I have a blog or something. And so this has been one of the benefits, man, of doing something like this is, you know, working with somebody like you who's gone and published some amazing stuff, increasingly so, you know, the mere fact that you're talking about anthologies, that you're in a privileged place that you can say, I don't know why, but I'm not reading sometimes, maybe it's wrong, but other stories in anthologies that I'm published in, you know, I just sit there and I'm like, bravo, bro, you're doing good, you know? And so, and you can say something like that, and it's true. And so, you know, if there are people listening right now, again, reach out to us. We would love to connect with you. And if you're interested in what we write, we don't talk about this very often, you know, Chad's written a bunch of stuff. And if you'd like to read some of the articles that have been published on the internet, or poems that I've written, or anything like that, some of the prose that I've done, just go ahead and email us again, paleocheeze@gmail.com. And cheese is with a Z. You got to remember that. Yep. So Chad, what have you been watching, man?
Still Better Call Saul. We talked about that before. I think we're on season 3 or I think 3. Still watching Curb Your Enthusiasm on season 4 now, and this is the 3rd time I've done that, and probably in a couple of years I'll probably be a 4th time. I love that show. And I'm still watching a lot of really bad horror movies. Like I just saw a really bad one called Final Exam. You know, what's weird is the beginning of that movie, it was early 80s. The beginning of that movie, it starts out with, it's like a college campus type thing, you know, a typical like slasher thing. And these college kids are on campus, and they're going to perform this prank, but you don't know it's a prank yet. The prank that they do would not go over too well these days. What they did was, wait do you hear this? You don't know that it's a prank yet. They plant members of their sorority houses or whatever they're called. They plant them around campus, like on the campus grounds outside. And then they have a van pull up, and this is a lighthearted, you know, cheesy slasher. This isn't some like dark film. A van pulls up, dudes get out with like ski masks on and automatic weapons and start opening fire on everybody on campus. And the dudes that are planted fall down and must have squibs or whatever, and their blood is squirting out of them, and then they lay there. And then the terrorist guys that jumped out of the van grab those that they shot and pull them in the van and take off, traumatizing everyone.
Oh yeah. They're going to therapy for a long time.
Yeah. And then, but a lot of people kind of laugh at it and go, oh yeah, that was, you know, recognize that van or whatever. That's the dudes from, you know, Pi Alpha, whatever, you know, and they're just doing this crazy thing. And I thought, man, first of all, you go to prison probably for the rest of your life. You pulled some kind of prank like that, if you even made it out alive. Yeah. And they just, they got to where they were going, and they took their ski masks off, and they were all laughing about it and drinking beers and high-fiving. And yeah, that was just that wasn't really part of the movie. It was just to show that they were prank kids, but that kind of prank, it wouldn't go over too well.
Yeah, no, that would definitely not go over well. And yeah, everybody would be going to therapy, like tons and tons of people. It wasn't that great of a horror film, though.
No, man, no, it really wasn't. But there's, dude, I'm gonna tell you, this is weird. I've always been kind of like anti-nap. My mom would force me to take naps when I was a kid, every day, you know, when I was young, when I was like 5, 6, 7, stuff like that. And I just had the hardest time doing that. And then as I got older, I just hated naps. And then a reader, a big fan of the stuff I've written, she offered to make me an Afghan of the Kubrick Shining carpet from the Overlook in exchange for the handful of books of mine that she didn't have yet, signed copies of them. She already had like 6 books or something. And so I was like, are you serious? That's a great deal.
I was going to say, yeah, dude, she's good. She knows how to barter. She's good.
Right.
Yeah.
So she did, man. She made this Afghan and sent it to me.
We have to be able to see this bad boy.
Should I pause it?
No, just go. Yeah, we can edit this out, man. Just go get it. Right. It's going to be a magical edit. We're letting everybody know right now. Okay. It's going to be a magical edit, a magical edit, a magical edit, a magical edit. And look, he's back.
All right. With the magic of editing technology, I went and got the app again. But before I show it, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, and if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes or whatever, you can go to our YouTube channel. Not all of our stuff is video, but sometimes we'll put it up. But so she sends me this Afghan, and I send her the books, and I start taking naps. But when I do that, I put on the worst horror movies, B movies. You know, I won't put anything on that I'm truly highly entertained by, because then I can't take a nap.
Yeah.
But there's in every slasher movie, there's always just people. There's just like half of the movie is different scenes of somebody creeping from one area to another area with 10 minutes of just, you know, looking around and stuff. And I always start to doze. And yeah, so this is my blanket, man, my Afghan that
wow.
She made. And yeah, it's the Overlook carpet.
Yes, dude, it is. With that crazy scene where the boy is playing with the trucks or the little cars, right?
Yeah.
The
carpet,
man.
Yes.
Yeah, the carpet. He's wearing. That's where he's wearing the rocket, the moon. He's wearing the.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. The conspiracy. Yeah.
It's but so yeah, Jude Scott is her name, and she made that for me, and I love it. And so it's cursed with sleeping powder, I guess, because. But anyway, now I take these naps, and now that's, you know, Italian horror movies. What I do though is I you know, I'll take them. It's like reading a book. A lot of these movies I don't watch in one sitting. You know, it can take me 3 or 4 days to get through one of these movies, just because I rewind and I'm interested in seeing the rest. Mm-hmm. And it's like this, you know, some people, you know, put on their, what are those noisemakers with crickets and thunderstorms and stuff like that. And I put on a really, really bad movie where, you know, and just start to doze off.
Yeah. What's that place called, man? Is it Brookstone? Is Brookstone? Yeah, I think it's Brookstone or something like that. That's the place. It's in a lot of malls, and they've got this kind of. They've always got cool stuff, man. I had one of those things you put over the face mask that you put on, and it's got that memory foam or whatever in it, and it was just so comfortable. And it had this little speaker, man, on the ear, and you could just turn it on, and you could listen to. There was frogs, and there was rivers and things like that. You know, you have to be careful with the river, man, and peeing your pants. But like, you know, the deer, whatever, you know, all different sounds that you could do. I don't know if they had deer. I don't even know if that would be very awesome at all to hear deer, you know. But it was, you know, I don't even know what that would sound like. But it's it was really cool, and I can just imagine having one of those. We have to have somebody figure out how to do this for you, Chad, where you get the mask, right? And it's got on there, it actually just has the audio that you can just tune in, and it just plays it real close to your ear, so you can just hear it gently and, you know, make it a little bit louder or quieter and just listen to the the sounds
bad
of
dialogue,
splashers and terrible dialogue.
Yeah, it reminds me. I remember you used to have an alarm clock that had an alarm on it of birds chirping.
Yeah, we need to share some of those. We'll figure out something, because we have some people don't know this, man, but we used to make videos. We have real indie stuff, man. Like back old school, where your camera, we were laughing about this just this week. Your camera, it was before editing software was, popularly available. Okay. It was very difficult. You had to go to a local TV station, Access Vision or something to work on editing program stuff. And even that was like the old supercomputers from the 60s. Beep boop, beep boop. It's all this. And now you can just got it on your phone or on your computer, and you've got stuff way light years ahead of that. But at the time when we were doing this, you were the one directing it. You're kind of the brainchild of this. And your camera, it was hilarious because there was you had to stop and start. Right. I mean, there was like you had to try to make sure, so we'd watch these videos and sometimes we'd have to fast forward and try to time it just right, so that when you started recording, it didn't have any space between it and it didn't cut over what was before. And only one time that I remember did we ever lose anything. There were gaps. There were gaps sometimes, little itsy. They were always real short if there ever was any. But there was only one time where it cut into the video, and it was unfortunate because it was a special effect. It was an amazing scene. Yes.
A disappearance.
A disappearing act. Boing. And it was perfect. Yeah. It was so perfect. But we have some of these, and we'll have to share some of that, because yes, that alarm clock, that was terrible. That alarm clock was extremely annoying. I thought it was
cool. I'd never seen one before.
Well, I mean, yeah, for the time, but going back watching it, I said, man, that would wake me up now. I'd be mad because it was not very authentic sounding, and it was a loop of this bird noise, right? And it was, I said, oh goodness gracious. But I've Back to the Future here, I've been watching some stuff too. I actually, because we had to watch 2 videos this week for this. And because I do other things, this isn't full time. We do this right now for just fun. We love what we do. And so we have other things that we do with our lives. But this week, I kind of took a step back a little bit from what I ordinarily would be watching, because I watched 3 movies. I won't mention one of them because we plan on doing a really cool episode of it in the near future, and even having a special guest. And I want, And so just throw that out there as a little teaser. We'll leave it at that. But I watched, of course, the 2 movies that we're talking about today, The Visitor and Unicorn City. But also, I while I was working, I stumbled on this video. It's a 4-part series that was published by Channel 4. And I don't know what Channel 4 is, if that's, something BBC. I don't know what was Channel 4. What was that? Anyway, there's a 4-part documentary called Hidden Hands, A Different History of Modernism. It's a series. This is according to Fulmar Television and Film Limited. It's a series which reevaluated some of the ideas about modern art. In part 1, it talks about the role that the CIA in promoting the American abstract expressions, such as Jackson Pollock after the war, which was amazing, actually, because it has the people who are leading the charge on this and who were involved in it, and how they were like, yes, we actually we promoted modern art in part because it was individualistic in a bipolar world between communism and the West, right? So between Russia and America, you have this kind of Russia and the West dichotomy, that Russia and communism, as it was spreading, was about uniformity, and they were really strict about art, and art was uniform. I mean, that's where socialist realism comes from, which anytime you look at the old propaganda pictures with Stalin, Mao, and all that, you're looking at socialist realism. But so America said, well, look, we America and the West and Europe, they cooperated, but said, how do we connect with artists in a way that even sometimes they're not being used overtly, but they're part of programs, or that they're tied in? They called it a long leash. and these museums and these art exhibits, and it goes through all these different ones and talks. Some of them they name some of the people who were involved as assets. Some of them they don't, because they're still alive. And they said, you know, we don't know if they would feel comfortable talking about it. And so they don't. But talking about promoting modern art, and a lot of people would say, well, this is crazy. You know, the surrealism and stuff, the expressionism, abstract expressionism. And they say, well, this isn't real art. But what they were doing is they were basically throwing it out there, saying, and putting even the weight of government behind it, to say it was the alternative to the uniformitarianism of communism, and saying that we promote individual expression, and the individualism is supreme to us. And so that was which is interesting, that in a propaganda campaign, right? Yeah. So you say, well, yeah, kind of. I mean, but the part 2, A Clean White World, showed how an obsession with hygiene and cleanliness that pervaded the Bauhaus and modernist architects had its roots in the filth and horrors of the First World War. Part 3, Sleeping with the Enemy, reviews the roles played by the great painters of France after their country was occupied in 1940. And number 4, Is There Anyone Out There? It's an explanation of the extraordinary fascination the early modernists had with the paranormal and spiritualism. And it was done by Channel 4 in 1996. It's a fascinating documentary series. And it was blowing my mind, because they're talking so casually about, you know, it's so far away from it by the time that they talked about it, that they were like, oh yes, you know, all the leaders, all the people on the board, you know, or the majority of the people on a board of this museum or this Institute for Art that was the biggest in the country at the time. Yeah, they were working with the CIA. You know, we worked with them and everything. And so they don't want to take credit. And they said they wouldn't want to say that the CIA is to credit for abstract art and abstract expressionism, but that it was involved in the promotion of it on a global scale, and it put its weight privately behind it as a mechanism in the effort to keep communism from spreading culturally throughout the world. And so it's stunning, actually. I remember.
Between what we're both watching, I'm dumbing down and you're getting smarter. I have a feeling that would help would help instigate a nap for me as well. What you're watching.
Yeah.
It does sound interesting though.
Yeah. It is. It's fascinating. And it's, you know, it kind of goes back even to the whole thing with Lynch. I'm still on it, man, where, you know, talking about surrealism and expressionism and all these artistic isms that are kind of infused throughout his art, right? Whether painting or whether the art of film, and the influences that were on him and others. And so just studying art theory, film theory, the history of cinema has led me down this road of studying this. And I just stumbled on this. I forget how it even happened, but I ended up stumbling on that documentary, and I thought, wow, I'm like, this is absolutely fascinating to learn about that and to see, you know, because I'm one of those guys that even in the past would complain and say, well, how is that art? You know, how is Warhol? How is this art, man? You know, and I wouldn't get certain things. And I to this day, in fact, I thought a part of it was kind of funny. And we've said this before, you know, in reference to some of the avant-garde stuff and comments in the comments section of the avant-garde videos on YouTube. But the idea that, you know, most people don't take the time to actually look at art. It's like they glance at it. And in glancing at it, they get a kind of first impression of it. And if they don't understand it immediately, if it doesn't just give them the message, almost like television oftentimes directly gives people the message, right? It doesn't leave much to fill in the blanks because it gives you the color and the scene and are there birds there? And whereas books and painting leaves a lot more to the imagination, theater, right? Leaves a lot more to the imagination. And so, you know, I before, even with media, with movies and stuff, I wouldn't think so deeply about it. And that's actually a newer thing for me, both with movies, music, art, all of this. We're talking within the last 10 years of my life. I'm 42 now. So, I mean, that's 32 years of being a passive receptor of a lot of art and film and stuff. And I was still, I think, more competent than a lot of people. but yet at the same time, not to sound too aristocratic or anything, but saying, yeah, I was, I thought about these things more deeply than a lot of people, but it wasn't until within the last decade of my life that I've really even started to think about it. And more recently still to do it with art where I'm actually looking at it. And I don't anticipate seeing magical visions looking into a blank canvas or something and going, yeah, the artist is, or a pair of sunglasses on the floor or something. I don't, that might be a tough one for me, but I'm becoming, I'm more open to the idea of really thinking through art and taking time.
Yeah. What about LARP theory?
LARP theory. Oh, we're going to get into it, man.
Let's do it, man.
All right, let's do this.
All right, so the first film we're going to talk about is one called Unicorn City. It's one that Jeremiah had already seen before. I had not, and he thought he wanted to share it with me. So I watched it. I watched it today, and it's a film. It's a comedy. It's kind of a feel good movie for sure.
Rom-com a little bit.
Yeah, and some role-playing geeks take their tabletop gaming to the next level when one of them decides to start a LARPing campaign in order to prove to a potential employer that he has leadership skills. And there's some there's a romance in there involved in there. It's directed by Brian Leffler and written by Brian, as well as Adrian Leffler. I don't know if that's his brother and
yeah, they're brothers.
Dayton.
Yeah,
and Cameron Dayton, and it stars Uncle Rico.
Yes.
Okay, so when you first saw this movie, and or maybe even just when you watched it again, you watched it with your kids.
Yeah.
Within that first 10 minutes, do you recall what your initial reaction was? Maybe you didn't have one.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can't remember. I certainly had. You
had initial reaction. Yeah. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. As a background, I watched this, I think, in 2012, and this was before. And I mentioned actually on the Paddleton episode, episode 2 of our podcast, I talked about my daughter and Samantha, who died of brain cancer, and how she was the princess, she indefinitely of all time, for a place called Black Rock Medieval Festival in Augusta, Michigan. And so, I remember going there. It was like 2015, I think is when we went for the first time. So watching this movie is something that happened before ever becoming familiar with LARP culture. In fact, the only thing I really knew about anything to do with role play games was actually you. I knew that you were into role play games. But I grew up in a home where we weren't even allowed to watch like Smurfs and He-Man. I had to give all my He-Man toys away. Okay. And I was especially angry about that because I had some super dope He-Man toys, man. It's just true. But we weren't allowed to watch that stuff because of, it was kind of the satanic scare stuff. And that was going around at the time. And so the idea of Dungeons and Dragons was like, whoa, no way. Magic the Gathering, that was a little bit later, obviously, but still, whoa, no way. So I was never in the culture of that. Like I didn't even have any friends until you that played anything like that. And it wasn't until in fact, you may have been the guy that showed me this. There's a movie, and we got to find this movie, man, the documentary about LARPing. Because you showed it to me, and there's a great scene in it. It's hilarious, man, because they're super serious. And I've met a lot of LARPers since then. But my first time seeing it, man, we were just cracking up. Because there's this scene where, they've got these rules, and they're pretty strict about it. And they're just, it was a wizard or something, and he was throwing something at an orc or whatever's going on. And he's just going to town, and they're saying out loud, 10 damage points, 10 damage points. And they're saying it super fast. Like I can't say it that fast, and they're just they sound like auctioneers or something. The blah, 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 blah. They're doing that with these points, and supposedly keeping track in their head, and they're arguing over. No, it was actually 30 times I did that. No, I think it was 27. And I mean, there's no way that this is real. But see, that laughter right there, that is what, in the first 10 minutes of this movie, the second time I watched it, this is what made me laugh. And I don't remember the first time if that's the case, but this time when I watched it, within the first 10 minutes, personally, I knew why I liked it, because the conversation and the debate over what's happening, and, you know, a challenge to the guy setting the narrative, setting the story, and saying, well, look, you know, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to, you know, use fire against you, and I'm going to use my shield or whatever. And the guy, Uncle Rico, he's the one setting the narrative. He changes very subtly, real quickly. It shows him, he kind of adds a power, right, to the list. And then he goes, oh, that sounds really great, but you forgot my character has this power. And they're all, yeah, psionic. And they're like, oh yeah, right, man. Like, how'd you do that? And he goes, and he pulls it out like it's been there the whole time. And it reminded me of South Park, the episode where Cartman, you know, I think they're being ninjas or whatever. I think it's the one where he's trying to walk naked. He says he's got it wearing cloak of invisibility, and he's walking naked across the stage or something. But in that episode, they're fighting, and he's, you know, they're like, I've got this power and this one, and they're fighting, and dude's got like every power. And every time he's adding something else, and I also have this. It's like, you know, so the childishness of that, and the way that played itself out in the first 10 minutes, I was reminded very quickly as to why I found it charming.
Yeah, I grew up playing D&D with neighbors, and we didn't LARP. We didn't do, well, you know what? When I think about it, I mean, it wasn't LARPing, I guess. I mean, when you're a kid and you're just playing like make-believe, whether you're, you know, cops and robbers, or you're being, you know, something like that, I never consider that being LARPing, not when you're young. But we did do some stuff where we had like trash can lids that were covered in like pillowcases and then wrapped with swing set chain, you know, around them. And then we used tent poles as spears, and, you know, we would battle with these wooden clubs and things like that, and makeshift swords. But it wasn't like there was no system, like you know, hit points or anything like that. We'd just do little battle scenes and stuff. But yeah, I think I started playing D&D around when I was like 9, and it was really cool when I was younger. And yeah, that was kind of like the beginning of the kind of satanic panic thing. And then that movie Mazes and Monsters with Tom Hanks came out, about the guy who got lost in the sewer and went crazy playing D&D. And so, but my parents, they were never worried about that. They were more worried about me listening to Black Sabbath, I think, than playing D&D. But I took like maybe a 10-year hiatus from that until I ran into somebody at work that played. And this was, I don't think I played any D&D from the age of like 14 until I was like 20, 24. And I played for a little while, and then off and on, you know, but never the LARPing thing. My son did that for a while, and it's something that I can appreciate for what they're doing, but I still can't help but laugh at it. I don't think anything bad of them. It's just not for me. And to me, it is funny and comical, but bless them for doing it. You know,
they could be doing worse. Yeah. They could be doing worse.
But when I was watching the movie, I kind of thought it was going to be more about board games and, you know, tabletop RPG stuff. They probably didn't have like the rights to use the intellectual property of D&D, because it wasn't called D&D. It was like called D of D, which stood for something else. I think that the word that I heard them use, which is, I think, public domain, and certainly didn't start with D&D. It was Tolkien had used it, and maybe wherever it came from before that, I don't know. But they had board games all around them, and I'm an avid board gamer. And I'm not talking about Monopoly and crap like that. I'm talking about anybody who's an avid board gamer. They know what I'm talking about. Like games that when you look at just when you set it up and look at it, it looks super intimidating and almost gives you a headache, like real thinking man's games or thinking woman's games. And so it was nice to see all that around there. But I will admit to, within those first 10 minutes, already trying to point out everything that's wrong. Like there's a scene where the chick whips out a printout of her boyfriend online that they're playing some MMORPG, some multiplayer RPG game, like World of Warcraft or EverQuest or something.
Yeah.
And she pulls out this printout of her boyfriend.
Yeah,
and the guy, and it's like a biped kind of. It's got like fawn goat legs or whatever, and it's got this huge sword.
It's tonic. It's a Tanic Stormblade.
Yeah.
Tanic Stormblade. Yeah.
This huge sword with a shield and what looks like plate mail. Particularly the shoulders, giant plate. And the guy looks at it, and this is the point where the movies really started to lose me as far as like the technicality. Like I'm thinking, okay, a huge gamer wrote this and they're really into this, and this is like a passion project for them. But this is where I was like, yeah, maybe not, because the guy, she showed the printout of this character, and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, he's a rogue," and I'm like, dude. And I geeked out in my head when I'm watching this. Like, first of all, rogues don't use shields. They don't use plate mail.
No.
Yeah. They don't use giant two-handers like that.
Oh.
And so that killed some of the fun for me. And I did kind of laugh at myself for geeking out on that. But within the first 10 minutes, I realized that this was not really what I thought it was going to be. I thought that the humor was maybe going to be a little bit drier, and it was very, very silly.
Yeah.
And I could tell I wasn't going to like it. And I'll be honest. I was like, how am I going to get through this? And I think I stopped. I stopped the movie, and I sent you a message, and I said, because I was like, I need to convince him. No, let's not do this.
And dude, I didn't even interpret it that way, because I remember I called you.
Yeah.
I called you and I was like, "Oh man, dude, I really like this. Is such a great movie. I really like it." And now thinking back, I'm like, I can only imagine you on the other end, eyes just being like, "Oh no!" Like,
yeah,
didn't he get the hint?
Because we haven't talked too much about my feelings about the movie, but there were characters right off the bat that really bothered me. The chick making out with that guy, it was too silly for me. And every time they showed that, I just kind of rolled my eyes, and I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be one of those kinds of movies. There were some laugh out loud moments for me though, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite character, I don't remember his name, but he was the older brother that owned the taco shop.
Yes, that brother.
That was like my favorite character.
Did you ever see? Man, I wish I had his name. I think I've got it down here. I should just know it. Have you ever seen the show Alias?
No, but I saw that he's in it.
Yeah, he's in it. He's the mastermind that comes up with all of the gadgetry that they have. So all the guns, this bubble gun will blow up, and you chew it for 10 times or whatever. That he's the guy that comes up with all those things, and he has an endearing quality about him. And I liked his character too.
He reminded me of like a bully Uncle Rico who couldn't, but he had some other qualities too. Like, he loved his taco shop, and when he would talk about it and talk about his brother not showing up, he would get like teary-eyed. But yet he was this macho dude, and he walked right in the house with his like silk tight shirt, blue and yellow tight shirt, and his silk like basketball shorts. like strutting his stuff around.
And he's really short. He's really short.
He made me laugh, and particularly when he gave that threateningly glare to the bigger guy and like turned his trophy to remind that guy, I'm a badass. Don't you forget that I got this wrestling trophy or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That I laughed out loud.
The characters are bizarre. And, you know, you've said a couple times, you know, you've used, obviously, Shadowhawk, John Grise, if I'm pronouncing his last name properly, Uncle Rico. We know him as Uncle Rico. Some of this has to do with the fact that the brothers, you know, Brian and Adrian Leffler, that they worked, at least, if I remember properly, I think it was Brian, at least Brian did. He went to film school with Jared and Jerusha Hess that did Napoleon Dynamite. And he was the storyboard artist and script supervisor for Napoleon Dynamite. He also worked on Gentleman Broncos. And I like Gentleman Broncos too. You know, so I mean, it's kind of, to me, you know, and I know when we haven't talked very much about this, but you did say, you know, I brought up Napoleon Dynamite and you said you thought that the humor was too silly compared to Napoleon Dynamite, which is more subtle. Yeah. And that's fair. You know, that's fair on that. You know, I thought it was interesting. Again, this is a guy who is from Utah, right? BYU, Brigham Young University, minored in film. I listened to I read an interview where he was talking about it, and he was saying that he minored in film because he could get his hands on the equipment and not have to do most of the classes. And then he majored in illustration. And so he was really into art, painting and things like that, and began working with Jared and Jerusha Hess pretty quickly. But it took him like a long time to write this out and stuff. And, you know, doing it a couple hours a day. He said he'd work, you know, from 10:30 to 1, and then he'd wake up in the morning at 5 in the morning to get at least another hour in. And him and his brother, they went through numerous drafts, had his dad go through it too. And he said there was a lot of people who wanted, they wanted them to, even people who were actors, wanted them to be more edgy and even maybe a little vulgar. And he really pushed back against that and said that he's glad that he did, that he's glad that he really pushed back against it because he wanted it to be the kind of thing. He said, I wanted to label myself, and he wanted to label himself as a writer and director who embraces family. And he wanted it to be something that, you know, the kids would be able to watch. And that I had no reservations at all. In fact, it's funny because there is a scene that it could have gone a little raunchier, you know, like where, because there's a love dynamic to this, you know, that the main character, this guy by the name of Voss, that's Devin McGinn, he's kind of being pursued by Marcia. That's
the guy that looks like a stoned Ryan Gosling.
He does look like a stoned Ryan. He looks blown out a lot. Like he looks just really blown, you know. Yeah. But Marcia's the girl that likes him. She's the one that showed the printout of the guy that she's dating on online. And that's Jacqueline Hales. And I liked her personally. I liked her a lot in the film. But you know,
hang on. Yeah. Speaking of that guy that was the Tarnak Stormbringer or whatever his name was. I can't remember what his name was. I did laugh out loud too when she was telling him online that she can't see him like that anymore because she's in love with somebody else. Yeah. And then he stood there, and those little winged demons or whatever were attacking him. They kept swarming, and then he just died like that.
And she's crying. Was funny. And she's crying. Like she's like, oh no. She's like, please answer me. And he's just standing there silent, you know, as these things, and there's more and more come around him. And then he's on the ground. He's like, I would like to be alone, kind of thing, you know. But there's a scene where she, you know, she's trying to hook up with Voss. She's in love with him, and he is aloof to the whole thing. And she's trying to hit on him. And the friend, the kissy kiss friend, she goes to her because she's not very good with men, and she feels like that one girl. If anybody's good with men, it's the one that has the boyfriend, and they're always kissing and stuff. So she goes to her and says, "Look, you know, I have feelings. What can I do?" And she goes, well, you do what I tell you, you know, you do this. So she goes ahead and she does it, and she's dancing. They're all around this fire. Okay. All these LARPers and stuff. It's nighttime. They're kind of resting for the evening and stuff. And they got a fire out there. And there's a guy playing the flute, and she comes out and she's dressed beautifully in this real flowing linen gown, very pretty. In fact, I like her dresses a lot throughout the film. And maybe it might be the only outfit that took a decent amount of money to make. I feel like the rest of them could have been the clothes that they had in their homes that they just figured out. And for the budget, it was super low budget, But she's dancing, and she's the seductress. She's trying to be the seductress. And I could imagine that going a little bit raunchier than it did. Other directors may have gone that route. With him, he did something I thought that was clever. And that is that he had the dress. She was still wearing the dress, but she wore a flesh tone bra on the outside of the dress that made it look almost like those old Greek, like almost like Spartan dresses that you have where their breasts, the women, are hanging out and stuff, but yet it's elegant and it looks beautiful, but it's that cutout where their breasts are hanging out there. And that it makes it almost look like that a little bit. But then you're like, wait a second, she's got a bra on the outside of her dress. And so even the part that was wooing and kind of the boys were going, ooh, and they're wiping their sweat off their brow because it was like, ooh, baby kind of thing. Even that didn't get bad. And when there was a belly dancer, right? She was it was succubus, and she realizes what's going on, and she jumps up, and that could have gotten even worse. I mean, you could have really had something crazy with that. And she ends up dancing in a way that is completely ridiculous. I mean, her dance moves are the worst. And, even doing kind of the bonobo chimpanzee hands over the head kind of motion, and pointing down like at the ground and doing these weird gyrations and stuff. Not an attractive dancing style at all, kind of harkening back to our great ape ancestors. And so it's like, it was just, but it said something to me that I said, even the one scene that I could have imagined that they would have gone, a lot of modern directors would have made it more scandalous, that I'm really grateful that I could very comfortably watch that with my children.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I've got this thing about, I can look at someone's face and like I can look at a girl with no makeup on, and whereas somebody might not be able to see the beauty behind it, I can tell that that because of the features that they have, just how pretty they might look with makeup on or something, whereas someone else might not kind of see that. They can't see that until all of the makeup is piled on. And I also have this thing where I recognize certain features in other people that make them look like other people. So if somebody has an actor's nose or something, and I can see if the rest of their body looks nothing like this actor or whatever, I can see that. And I try to point it out to my wife sometimes when we're watching someone's like, hey, doesn't that look like so-and-so? And she just doesn't see it. So that being said, I thought that the big guy, Clancy, I think was his name.
Yeah.
If Kurt Russell gained, I don't know, 150 pounds, he would look just like that. If he had that hair, that kid looked a lot like Kurt Russell. You have to look at the thing.
Yeah, people have to see it. Yes. I thought one thing that was interesting about the film, there was a question that was asked, and I wish I need to find out, man. I need to go back and see the interview to find out who was interviewing, because I need to give him credit. But the interviewer said, how are you able to walk the fine line of making fun of a culture while also showing a great affection for that culture? And one thing that they mentioned, first of all, was that the interest wasn't so much in the games. In fact, they spent 8 months. The writers joined a guild for 8 months in the lead up to this, but they weren't so much interested in the technicalities of the games, which is something that you brought up. It was quite obvious because they were talking about, was it a renegade or what was it? What was it?
He called him a rogue, and it was
a rogue.
Not a rogue,
yeah. So he's not a rogue. Okay. And so he wasn't very good about a detail. Okay. But he said he was more interested in the gamers themselves. And when asked about how do you poke fun at a culture like this while also showing affection for it, and he says, I think you have to do that by showing their pain. And he said, because the story, if you're just showing them being silly, but if you show them as people where they said they don't feel that they are meant for this world, that they feel like losers, they feel like they're not very special, that some of those are things that are common, right? And some of those are unique to people who, not unique to them, but especially significant for people who find their home in a kind of escapism. A kind of escapism that doesn't just say, I want to get away for a minute, but says, I want to be that. I wish that was real. And I would like to even pretend that that's real and just live that for a moment. And I know the power of that. Okay. I've seen it. I've lived it. I've watched it. There's a girl, and you know, her parents listened to the show, a good friend of my daughter. And, you know, she was a girl, man, bullied and stuff, you know, at school. It went through really tough times. And she went to the medieval festival with us. And when she went there, she was so happy while she was there because people were calling her Milady and stuff like that, because she was the princess's best friend. Mm-hmm. And they would come and they would bow before her and stuff, just like they would for my daughter. And she felt so special and so significant that so I saw that. I mean, because I see her when she's not there, and I saw what they did. So I'm like, I thought that was a cool thing for them to say. And I think that for all the faults in the film, and as much as I like it, I have to admit, it's not a perfect film, Jet. It's close. It's maybe a 4.9999. No, but not really. But it's but I felt that for all the possible criticisms that could be leveled against it, I thought that that was something like the adult, or like the fact that it was made with kids in mind and stuff like that, and to be family friendly, that the empathy factor, to show that it's really trying to make these goofy, but also real people that have real concerns that are common in a community of gamers and guildsmen and guildswomen.
That's kind of touching. Yeah, because it almost makes you, well, like I said, it almost makes you feel bad for making, you know, poking fun. But like I said earlier, you know, I don't fault them for doing that. I mean, it's just not my thing, but I can't help but kind of chuckle, you know, when we're watching that documentary and dudes going lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt, you know, it's fun. I'm sorry, but it's funny. Yeah. But I also think it's great that they're doing that and that they're passionate about that. But
by the way, real quickly, that interview was done by Theology of Games. It doesn't say, it might just be the person who's running that. They have a podcast apparently. It's the first time I've ever gone there, so I don't really know much about it, but it's a special interview with Unicorn City director Brian Leffler. And so, yeah, Theology of Games at theologyofgames.com. And people should go and check that out. Okay, so your I guess your final thoughts on the film and your rating. My final thoughts. You know, my final thoughts are, this will not be the last time I see it. I have children young enough that I'm quite confident. You know, we've got our little Lucian Ignatius, little Louis. And so, you know, he's almost 1.5. So he's going to watch it. I'm confident. And then we got another one in the old pepper pot, man. So in the cooker, and that bugger is going to come out in September. And so I'm confident that little dude's going to want to watch it too. So I'm confident that I'll end up seeing it again. And I know that I'll enjoy it again. And I know that I will, you know, to be honest, and I know you're going to laugh, man, because you definitely don't agree with me on this, but I choked up like twice. And it was over the love part, in fact. And I don't choke up and, you know, I wasn't like, you know, blubbery or nothing, but it just kind of was like, man, that's really moving. Like the scene where Voss is really upset and he swings at Shadowhawk, right? And he swings at him, and Shadowhawk dodges, and he swings, and he goes too fast and swings around, missing him, and it ends up hitting Marcia in the face. And he didn't mean to. And it's a really, you know, because she's really a self-sacrificing person. She loves this dude, right? And in fact, I kind of think she's, in some ways, it's almost her story. It's kind of like the dad on Mary Poppins, that it's really about the dad, you know, or another movie that we're going to talk about maybe next week that is about a character in the film that I did not, my first time watching through would have never thought that was kind of the person that it's really, then goal is kind of that person. But I thought that it was a great love story. I felt that it did a really surprisingly good job of describing human interaction, love, how the things that boys and girls do. I think it's kind of like going back and reading Mark Twain stuff, you know, like Tom Sawyer. I think Tom Sawyer is really good at that. And I think that this, in a way that's funny and in a way that uses characters and everything that you wouldn't normally think of in that way, but I think it's brilliant, even from a Evo Psych context. And so I would give the story overall, for me in my house, we give it a 4.5 or 4.6.
Wow.
Well, I encourage people to watch it. And I very much enjoy it. And I liked the music. I felt that for the most part, the music went along with the tone and the feel of it. And that's actually something that I normally don't think as much about, but you've actually rubbed off on me in that way. And so yeah, that's how I'd rate it.
Okay. You ready?
I'm ready, man. Yeah.
Okay.
Lay it on thick, man. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'm gonna be completely transparent here. Outside of, I'm not an easy crier just in life in general, you know, dealing with stuff, with life stuff, whatever. I don't cry easily. I don't cry when I'm reading books. They just don't get me there. There's something about the visual medium, movies and TV, that I connect deeply on an emotional level. And I don't have to be that invested. I don't have to watch a 2 or 3 hour movie and then come to the end and then finally tear up. It can be a really quick scene. And I've talked to before about being like a hyper empath, and movies bring that out in me. And when you said that you choked up, I have to admit that there was a scene in the movie, in this stupid movie, that where I choked up a little bit. And what's weird is that it was such a predictable scene, but it didn't really seem to matter. And it was when the guy went to go back and get the job, his second interview or whatever, and he was flipping through that notebook with all the Polaroids of all the characters. And I was like, oh, geez, he's going to flip to the chick, and then he's going to stare at it, and then we're going to see his face and the music, and, we're going to know that he's thinking about her, and he's finally realizing how much he cares for her, even though that's exactly how it went down. Yeah. As soon as they flipped the page and they showed her picture of her, I did choke up, because I knew, I think I get teary-eyed more when things turn out good. I think my cries, if you will, are more like happy cries, kind of, usually when I'm, and so, when I see couples get together at the end of a film or romantic comedy or whatever, it does hit me. And for some reason, that very predictable scene, seeing the Polaroid of her, it kind of choked me up a little bit. And I did think it was cool that he told her, not only did he not take the job, but he didn't even mention that he had gotten the job. Right. He wasn't like, this is how much I like you. He was just, he's like, no, I didn't get it.
He bit the bullet. Man.
And that being said, I did not like the movie. I walked away going, well, that was a 2 for me. I walked away saying that. For me, it was bad at the beginning, and then it got better, and it had some scenes, like I said, where I did laugh out loud at least 3 times, where I laughed out loud. But the ending was, for me, was really bad because everything was wrapped up in this ridiculously unrealistic manner. Like the judge is like, I'm going to give you 800 hours of community service to do what you want to do. If I could be king. And then the cops were just way too silly for me, and everything just tied up together so perfectly.
Yeah.
And I know that it was that kind of a movie. And I did mention to you earlier when we talked very briefly about it that I felt like it was more of a kid's movie. I was going to rate it a 2. And, I could go up to, maybe like a 2.8 after, we've talked about it. I do appreciate what you appreciate about it. And I see those things. But unless you're under the age of 12 and that you're into LARPing, to me, that's the ideal audience. It's not, it just wasn't for me.
Well, and look, that's why I can grant that. But at the same time, it's just a personal thing. I'm actually okay with movies like that. Like some people aren't, and I look, man, I'm a tragedian, right? I'm almost Dionysian in my tragedy. And yet at the same time, I'm like, every once in a while, man, it maybe offset the deep and the dark by this kind of, fluff and stuff, sugary and sweet.
Yeah.
Silly and predictable stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that fans of LARPing in period would probably enjoy it. And I'm not saying that anybody above the age of 12 is going to hate it. I just feel like that's probably the target audience. But yeah, for me personally, it wasn't for me. I'll not be watching it again.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's that movie.
Yep.
We watched 2 of them.
Yes.
Right. So we watched a second movie. And these were both mine. Like now I'm feeling, I'm like, so we picked these amazing and epic and notable things leading up to this. Like every single movie is awesome and notable in some way or another, almost like kind of a genre standard almost in some ways. Maybe no, this isn't one of those. The movie The Visitor. It's a what do they call that, man? A psychotronic film?
Yeah, psychedelic psychotronic space journey with battle between good and evil using kids as bait. I don't know.
Man. It was directed by, is it Giulio Paradisi? But he went by the pseudonym Michael Paradise. Michael J. Paradise.
All of those writers had there's 4 writers too involved with the screenplay. Yeah. And they all had like closely resembling Americanized pseudonyms.
The film is built around the ridiculous framing device featuring a Christ-like figure, which is Franco Nero, who summons an interstellar prophet, who's John Huston, to stop a young girl by the name of Paige Connor, the real woman, and her mother, Joanna Nail, from spreading the literal and figurative seed of the evil, unseen Satine. So it was a very bizarre thing where you've got one character's name is Yahweh. The Jesus character, by the way, this kind of blonde-haired, looks like almost like a
Jesus,
yeah, surfer Jesus, hippie surfer Jesus guy, and he's surrounded by all these kids with shaved heads. They look like Hare Krishna people, so they it's kind of the way the feel of it, or some kind of Tibetan monk or something. And you've got this Yahweh figure right at the very beginning. In fact, it's beautiful. The effects and stuff. I was interested to see, like, how do they get this, where the clouds come rolling in at the beginning. And so you got this character looking out. He looks a little bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi a little bit. And he's looking out into the distance, and there's a sun, and you see these clouds swirl and kind of roll in. And then somebody comes up out of the sun, and it's very, very, the person looks very tall and is wearing what appears to be kind of like a burqa, like the full blown ones with the little grill in the front that you got to look through and everything. I mean, it completely covered. But then it starts snowing real badly, and the wind is blowing like crazy. And then the cloak starts to come off of the woman, and come to find out it's not a woman, it's a young girl. And then it blows off, and it's this little girl, and she's covered in this crazy snow and stuff, staring down Obi-Wan, and then starts walking slowly backward. Turns out Obi-Wan is Yahweh, right? That's the guy. And she's walking backward, and then she disappears, boop, and she's gone. And that's when Yahweh shows up and lets Jesus know it's happened again. This time she's this young girl named Katie, and she's 8 years old. And that's the beginning. And apparently it's what it is. And Jesus explains it at the beginning, right? It's the Jesus guy. And they never call him Jesus, but that's basically what he is. But he's telling the story. And how does it go, man? Isn't it that Satine was a prisoner on a spaceship, and he'd snuck out somehow out of the back of this spaceship, and he was spreading the wickedness in the galaxy?
I thought that he had offspring. So even though he was gone, the offspring are what they need to, keep under control now.
And it's kind of weird because it harkens to the proto-evangelium, which is the part in the Bible at the beginning of the Bible where the curse on the devil, and that God tells the devil that there will be enmity between your seed and the woman, and that he or she, depends on translation, will crush your head and you will bruise his or her heel. And so the idea is that the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, that those two are rival groups. And one of those, the seed of the devil, is what is going to bring the wickedness, and the seed of the woman, the covenantal woman, is going to bring the good, and those would be the covenant children, which ultimately would be Jesus. And so you can see this kind of symbolism and everything at play, but just sci-fi'd out.
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but I didn't see a lot of the spiritual overtones as far as like the Trinity goes. But the more you talked about it, even Yahweh, I mean, I don't know if that's not even trying to hide it. I mean, I think even a lot of Christians don't even know, or maybe not a lot, but maybe your average Christian isn't familiar with the term Yahweh.
It's called the Tetragrammaton.
And when they said Satine, I heard Zatine. I even spelt it out, Zateen, phonetically, because I thought that. But then as you started talking about that, and I'm like, Satine, Satan, okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to say my initial thought, within the first 10 minutes, what kind of movie is this? I was excited because I love movies that take place in the 70s. They just make me feel all warm and fuzzy, man. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and so I get nostalgic. And the whole movie had this kind of they did something a lot in the 70s, particularly if a woman was on the screen, where they had this kind of hazy filter over it. The whole movie was like that, which reeked of 70s right there. But like I said, a lot like if you watch some old episodes of anything where there's like in the 60s and 70s, like I think Star Trek did it too, where there's a beautiful woman in it, the scenes that they are in are like hazy, like have a filter on them. Yeah. And my biological father was a photographer, and he used to take pictures like that of women, clothed and not clothed, and to get that effect, just put Vaseline on the lens.
Really?
And it would it would give this beautiful hazy effect. I don't know if that's what they used then. I mean, professional photographers used that back then. They carried Vaseline thing, and I don't know that that's what they did. I would assume that if this big movie company has something else that they're using, but I did notice that everything had that kind of like dreamy, I just woke up, crap is in my eyes kind of look. And they're in this room, which is essentially a greenhouse, but for some reason a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, which I thought was hilarious.
It's got glass all the way around, and then there's chandeliers all over the place.
Yeah.
And
glass walls, glass ceiling, beautiful plants all over. Looked like a place that you would love to hang out in, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so instantly I was like, okay, I'm going to have fun with this. Whether it's a good movie or not, I'm going to enjoy this. But then the music kicked in.
Oh, no. Yeah. You didn't like the music. You didn't like that. Or did you just think it wasn't fitting in some places? Like, how do you?
It absolutely was not fitting at all, ever. And no,
never.
The music was hilarious. Oh, yeah. I don't know how familiar you are with in the late 70s and very early 80s and mid 70s and probably even early 70s. You know, we only had so many channels, and so we were at the mercy of like Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night like movie presentations. And they were special moments. You know, you were at the mercy of whatever was going to be aired, and you learned to appreciate it. Sometimes, unless you bought a TV guide, you didn't know it was coming on. So you know, get the popcorn going, and then come, 8 o'clock, then this elaborate orchestrated music that was meant to just really bring you in and get you excited about this feature presentation would start. And it would have all of these just rainbow of colors of glittering lights and this giant font that just, screamed Hollywood. And it would say like, the Saturday night movie presentation with all these stars and lights and flashing. That music in the movie was exactly like that, like every special movie presentation. And it took me back, and it was so hilarious because it was used in, like, I think the first instance they used it was on John Huston, and the second was when he popped up again. And it reminded me of like Halloween, where you'd see Michael Myers and it would be like, "Boing!" like that.
Right.
Except for, so this would do that, and it would have this dramatic effect, but it would go on for another 60 seconds.
Right.
It's just ridiculous music.
And they played that. Yeah, they repeated that a lot, almost like it was thematic.
Yes.
And sometimes, I gotta say, man, I actually liked the music. I agree with you that it didn't fit. Although I would say I think that it fit sometimes, like during racing around scenes that were more intense. But people should go judge for themselves. You can find the entire soundtrack. It's The Visitor. Stridulum, Stridulum, I believe it's Stridulum, 1979 original motion picture soundtrack by Franco Michalizzi, Micalizzi, and I'll tell you, man, I've been bumping that jam in the background as I've been doing work. I was like, I'm gonna read a bunch of these weird things online about the film, and I'll just listen to this music. And it was funny. The only time I turned it off was when I watched this video. I was looking up anything to do with The Visitor and esoteric, or The Visitor and occult and stuff like that. Any kind of keyword. And this one came up, and it was Illuminati and the Bible in The Visitor movie. And I'm like, oh, I definitely need to see this video. Like, illuminate, confirm. And so I need to definitely find out who this is. And it was this guy named Ken Ami, AMMI. He's over on YouTube, truefreethinker.com. And it was so crazy because this dude, this Ken Ami guy, I had seen a video by him a while back that blew my mind about the Nephilim and giants and all the references that had ever been done to the idea of these individuals in Bible passages that are referred to as giants, okay, who came down and bred with the women, the ladies of the men, right, of humankind. And there's all these theories about it, but his specific video with a guy named Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis, who also does movie reviews, it blew my mind. So when I saw him, I'm like, oh, well, now I definitely have to see it. And so I watched it, and it's the only time though that I turned the music off, and sadly, I kind of regretted it because I watched it and I thought, it doesn't actually have a lot of him in it. It's just a bunch of words. He shows like different parts and scenes and stuff, and says here's where it's kind of occultic and everything, but it wasn't too It wasn't too mind blowing, man. So it's kind of bummed out. Not to dog him. Obviously, I've said some nice things about him. But so the music, the occultism, the references in the Bible, and then I believe that they're doves taking on the evil, and these white doves come in and save the day. And as they're attacking this young girl, they become darkened, and to the point where they're almost like black, right?
Oh,
they're
city pigeons, man. At the end,
they were city pigeons.
Yeah.
But you've got one in particular, right? One that the one that snaps a cord, right? That toward the end that busts in there, and it's flying around, and it ends up snapping it. That one was white, so far as I could tell. And it was my right away, I thought, okay, that's like the Holy Ghost, right? Now you've got the Trinity involved in this, purging the evil. And then you have all these other birds come in and take on the wickedness of this. And the bird that was white that eventually turned black, and that was maybe the most stunning effect of the entire film was the bird.
Yeah. Oh my God,
dude.
Yeah, it like it turned like metal or plastic or something, and all of a sudden a stiletto beak that shot out and probed the guy in the neck. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
But I honestly felt that was the one time in the film where the effect wasn't that impressive. And I actually felt that I felt that the movie was actually pretty good on some things. They were saying that the guy who made it, they were saying that the director that did TV and stuff over in Italy, that he's really, really good at doing scenes with camera, really the tracking shots. Let me see here. Among other characteristics, he has a penchant for technically challenging tracking shots and tricky camera moves. And I felt that was kind of true throughout that. I felt that the way that the background would kind of appear at times, and you would have multiple layers, like you'd have a building that you're kind of looking up at a building, and then there's another building behind it. And as it almost looks like that building's coming dauntingly towards you. It was almost intimidating to see. Is weird that he was able to somehow do that. And it's a neat shot. It's a tricky camera move that he was able to do. Some of the moves with the skating sequence, which, by the way, the main girl, what is her name? Katie. Yeah, Katie. That was Paige Connor. I heard an interview by her because we looked her up, man. You found her on Facebook. Yeah. She's got what is her business? She got like a eyelash place, doesn't she?
Eyelash place. Yeah. She doesn't really doesn't act or anything like that, and doesn't really have much to do with that. She's just a beautiful woman who hangs out and owns this little business.
Yeah. And it's kind of crazy too, because honestly, I felt she did pretty good, all things considered. She's got some weird stories, man. She said, like Shelley Winters, for example, the actress Shelley Winters, she's the maid in this film. Real weird character. But that she said that she was literally hitting her, and that she even admitted that she loved scenes where she could hit kids. And the mom, she said the mom was getting mad.
What?
Yes. And she said she hated working with Shelley Winters. She hated it. She never wanted to go. She never went into her dressing room. She didn't even like being in any scenes with her at all, because she would always like hit her. And when she said that, she said her mom was never very protective before this movie, but that Shelley Winters really changed her, and that the mom finally put her foot down and said, look, you need to stop. And it was apparently like tense. So it was a real thing. Like, it wasn't a joke, I mean, and it was some weirdness with that. And then there was the guy, who's the guy, I should know his name. The guy, I believe, from Jaws. No, not Jaws. I'm so sorry. Not Jaws, Alien and Predator.
Oh, Lance Henriksen, of course. Yes.
I can't believe I said Jaws.
Yeah, he's in a bunch of genre films.
Yeah, a whole bunch of these. I believe he was one of the guys in one of these interviews that I was listening to. And when they asked him about, I don't know if they were really clear that this movie was what they were going to ask him about. But when they said, so the visitor, his response was, oh, like this. And he was not happy. And he said that it was a terrible experience. And that he said that, what was the phrase? They were showing scene. He said the director was throwing scenes at the wall and hoping that they would stick, and that he was banking on actors drawing the crowd. But he said that he went to a viewing of it with a friend, and he was watching it and thinking he was so ashamed of it. And he said this dude stood up in the back and he goes, "Mother effer, I want my money back." And he was so mad about it. It's funny because we were talking, you and I, and your wife, you know, she does the voice, and I don't think we've ever said thank you on the show about that, but your wife does the voice at the intro, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, a big round of applause for a really amazing lady. You're blessed to have an amazing wife.
I am very blessed.
Yes. And but she was talking about a scene at the end, because it goes a little bit Exorcist-esque, right? At the end, you know, you got this kind of monster scene, you know, with the little girl and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where she's dragging her mom's body up these stairs, and there's no way that little girl was able to do that, like in real life. And your wife said, "Man, was it like a little person?" And we laughed about it. We're like, "No, you know, it's not. You know, it's not a little person." Well, they asked Katie. They asked her in this interview, Paige Connor, they said, "Was that you?" And she goes, "No, that was a little person." She used that exact phrase. She said, "It's a little person." And I said, so I immediately thought of your wife, man. And I said, "You got to tell her, man." She knew it. She was right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Because the body proportion didn't, but I was like, I was trying to figure out how they did that. Either a very strong person, or they had reconstructed the set so that it was flat but made to look like it was still the same stairs going up, and that they were just pulling them, you know, instead of up, just pulling them straight across. The we were talking about being like an Italian film. I've seen most of the Italian films I've seen are all horror stuff, like Argento and Fulci. And this definitely does not feel like any of those. It doesn't feel like an Italian film that I've seen. And but knowing that and hearing that ridiculous music and some of the things that they used, I feel like that music to me was kind of like, if you see some kind of like no offense to the Japanese, but when you see like a Japanese thing where it's got a tagline that is supposed to really draw you in, like the Americans, and it'll be like super happy fun time juice or something like that. You'll have all these adjectives, and you know, that's what the music kind of felt like to me. It was like, this is what, you know, they've got going on over there. Let's have this in all of our dramatic moments and really pull the audience in like they do on the Saturday night movie feature. And I feel like they borrowed and maybe even tried to ride on the coattail or set success of some of the movies that had come out in that around that same time.
Yeah. Because,
The Omen came out before that, hugely popular film, which was, it was kind of similar, but Damien Omen in The Omen was more subtle. He wasn't a loudmouth. He was just kind of there, this ominous little boy who did cause, some chaos and some death, and much like this girl, but she was kind of like more like this Bad Seed figure, like from the film Bad Seed.
She's like an evil Punky Brewster.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
but the movie Carrie too, because the visitor started to become more like you start to find out that this girl has like telekinetic powers. Mm-hmm. She's able to make things move and things like that, and cause people harm through that, which is what Carrie ended up doing. And Carrie came before that too. And you've got this female figure. So you've got a child figure who's like this demon child. And then you've got Carrie with the telekinetic powers. And then, but also there were scenes that dealt with very bright lighting. There was a couple scenes where a semi came up behind them and then passed, but then another truck came up that was like a spaceship kind of thing with a ramp. There was another scene too where it was just like this bright light coming over kind of like a hill, and all of that I'm convinced was taken right out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which came out 2 years before The Visitor. All that lighting stuff. So I think that in all of those movies were really successful. The Omen, Carrie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they were big hits at the time. And this being an Italian film, I feel like it almost feels like they took this, Trinity approach, and they're like, well, how can we, wrap this up into let's take a little from here, a little from here. There was even a little bit of another movie that was, I don't think it was popular at the time. It's one of my favorite movies, called The Brood by David Cronenberg. And that with some creepy little kids doing very evil things too. And that came out in the 78, 77, something like that. So I think it was just like, I think it was kind of borrowing from a lot of these different things.
I thought that one thing, and maybe there's examples of this too, right? But ever since you got me on this whole thing with David Lynch, I'm watching, like I mentioned to Josh Mallerman in our last episode, talking about the episode 8, season 3 of Twin Peaks, and how it's so bizarre. And there's things in there that's like, what in the heck is this? Like, what is this about? And you see that even in the first episode or the first couple of season 3, these really just bizarre things that take the Red Room, right, and make that, this whole nother level of crazy. And I felt like there were scenes in this movie that way. The opening scene where there's the snow and stuff, and all that, I thought that was a real surreal kind of thing. And then the scene at the end where Yahweh is basically controlling the stars, and he's on this runway it's on top of a building, and there's a lot that goes on that's never explained. And that, to me, Lynch does that all the time. He has stuff thrown in there that just, like in this movie, there are, when Yahweh shows up, because he has to get Katie, he needs to stop the evil from spreading, and she's the evil. So he needs to make sure that she gets back. And just in case anyone does want to watch it, we won't say what happens or if that happens and how that may play into other things in the movie. But he comes to the earth, and he goes atop this building in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's by himself, and it looks like there's a runway of lights, and the runway is facing a city, and you can see the haze of the glow of the town, the light pollution far away. Which is never explained, by the way. Nobody knows what city's that, because they're in Atlanta. So what city's off in the distance, far away, that's lit up like that? And so, but he's looking, and it looks as though the runway, if we can call it that, is lighting up in all different colors. And then he raises his hands in the air, kind of like Moses, right, from the 10 Commandments. He raises his hands up in the sky, and then it vanishes. The color that's flickering on the runway, and then the scene leaves, and then later it comes back, and it's him again, and he's staring down the stars, like he looks real menacingly almost at the stars, like something's going on. He's communicating with them, and they start moving around, and the scene goes back and forth between him and these stars that are moving, and then they line up, and they're making all these weird movements and stuff, and it lasts for a good 3 to 5 minutes. I mean, it's not a short scene at all. And it's got this music and weird angles as it approaches him from kind of a tilted angle. And, but it never explains it. There's nothing. It never says, and that's what this was about. and I don't think, I mean, I could put my thinking cap on, for maybe years of my life and never get to the answer. I don't think there is an answer. I think it's just, I think it's Lynch-esque in that way, or Lynch is this guy-esque in that way, that some stuff just simply, it may not make sense. Maybe it's an isolated thing. But it doesn't work, I don't think, as well in this film I like it in Lynch's films. It leaves me wanting more and saying I want a follow-up season, even though I know that the follow-up season is going to leave me with the same bazillion questions left unanswered and storylines left untold, unfinished. Whereas with this one, the Yahweh situation, I said it was kind of cool, but at the same time, it would have been better if it would have made a little bit of sense as to what it was about.
I have a theory about that scene and why it was used. I don't know if you've ever seen Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It was the first Star Trek movie that they made.
Yeah.
Well, there are some really, really lengthy scenes of, they had the Star Trek series in the late 60s, and then they didn't have anything. And then they had the motion picture. And between that lapse there, technology in special effects and budget, got way up there. I mean, they got a bigger budget so that they could do stuff that they normally maybe wouldn't have been able to do in the 60s, but also the advancement of the technology that they were able to use for special effects was fairly new. So the things that were missing from the original show, they were finally able to show in the motion picture. And as a result, there are some extremely lengthy scenes in Star Trek where we're talking minutes long, where it's showing like one of the little spaceships going to another ship, but it's showing this really slow like ride, and I'm talking like 2-3 minutes, and that's all you're watching is this thing. And I feel like my theory on that is the same that I have with this, that people at the time were supposed to be, can you believe these effects? And that people were so blown away by these new, newfangled effects that Hollywood can do now, that they thought it would be entertaining for the audience to be like, wow, look at how advanced we are. Look at what they can do now with these visual special effects. That's the only thing I can make sense out of that, because that scene in The Visitor was just far too long.
Way too long.
Make any sense. And this guy wasn't David Lynch. He wasn't trying to be, I just feel like it's
he wasn't David Lynch.
It's like going to, when you first go down to Access Vision and you see the fact that you can put like a swimming bowl of goldfish behind people that are there, or you can do all these crazy effects. So you do it, and some people can do it too much. Yeah. Because it's the first time that they're seeing it, and they're just so amazed. And really, that doesn't hold up.
Like transitions, dude. Remember when transitions, like you could watch a show, and we use the phrase access vision. It's public access TV. That was the name of, we both are from Battle Creek, Michigan. And that's the name of that place, is Access Vision. And we both have experiences, having grown up there and been on Access Vision and stuff. And I remember shows where they were pumping out transitions, where you have the cube, where it goes from one scene to the next, and it's a cube. And it's the same scene, by the way. Like it might be two guys sitting between the ferns, right? Like like the show. And they're sitting at a table with the blue black backdrop behind them and everything, or the curtain. And it's super boring looking. And they're like, okay, on to the next topic. And it's just got this cube spinning, and then it fills out the screen, and then it would do one where it like spirals and then spirals off the screen, and then 5 seconds later it's parting ways, kind of like a curtain, and I'm thinking, bro, you just use three transitions in 30 seconds. You need to slow up on that. You're fascinated by this. I can see someone has a new toy.
One more thing I want to mention that we haven't really talked about was at the beginning of the film, the very first thing you see is before anything is a mention of a thank you to a couple different people, one of which was the mayor of Atlanta. And this is pure speculation. This is just a silly theory I have. I don't know what the thank you is for, but my theory was that he was an investor because they've got to have investors. He was an investor, and with a stipulation that because usually thank yous are at the end of gratitude is at the end of a film, not at the beginning. You want to get the viewer right into the mood, and this is right at the beginning. And I like the mayor said, maybe, I'll invest in your movie under these conditions. Number one, I want my name at the beginning recognized somehow. And maybe he didn't say that, I don't know. But there was a couple of other things. One was some product placement. There's a scene where the little girl, Katie, I guess her name is, where she went out into the city, and right behind her was a giant Coca-Cola display lit up with lights. And then in her house, which is a beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous house with, it's all very open, very 70s, modern for the time, giant screen TV for the Pong game, and an indoor pool. And then right above their dinner table, they have a chandelier, but the chandelier is actually just a hanging light, a 7-Up hanging light from the beverage. So you've got two Coke products. Now, then the very, very beginning of the movie is an Atlantic basketball scene that takes way too long. And it has absolutely zero to do with the rest of the movie. And so all of these things, Coca-Cola being being from Atlanta, I guess it's made there, the main plant is there, and then you've got the Atlanta, and yes, it was supposed to take place in Atlanta, but you had all of these things. I can see the mayor investing as long as they shoehorn some prideful kind of city pride, shoehorn that right in there.
The basketball game, I want to say this. Number one, it says on IMDb that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was in that. And I was like, I didn't recognize him, but then again, he would have been pretty young, and I recognize him with his hair shaved and stuff like that, when he's bald. And he always looked lighter skinned. They had a guy named Abdul, I think, that was the main guy that was like, he's really great. And I wasn't thinking at all like, oh, that's Kareem. Like, maybe it was. Either way, it had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in it, which was pretty awesome. And there was a scene, and I gotta say this, man, because some of the shots were really cool and just original, And there was a scene where they were dribbling. A guy was dribbling, and he's kind of weaving his way through the crowd, and it's almost as though the camera was waist high, or kind of at a sternum. But it was just a fascinating shot, and it kind of reminded me, not to make light of that, but it kind of reminded me of the shot at the beginning of the TV show Alf, where Alf is like running through the house, and it's kind of, if you were at his level, where he would be looking around the house and stuff. And I kind of felt that that's the way that was. But the fact that it was bouncing a ball in front of that, and then looking up and kind of following the ball as it goes to be shot, I thought that was it was pretty awesome, man.
There were definitely some interesting shots in there. Like a prepubescent girl's crotch.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. But it's true, isn't it? Isn't that true, man? I mean, that's like straight up.
It was unsettling.
Dude, it was. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, bro. Like, what were the Italians into? You're right, because she's doing there's a couple scenes where they're kind of showing off her athleticism. But that scene that you're talking about, she's basically stretching for gymnastics, and it shows her do some basic things, like she's doing some splits and stuff. But then it's got a scene where she's
didn't the whole scene open up like right on her crotch? Isn't that how the whole scene opened up?
It was either the very first scene or it was the second. But she's doing these positions. It's kind of like when you're doing toe touches and you're sitting down on a mat and you've got your legs spread as far as you can, and then you kind of bend down to touch your toes. Well, she's doing that, and the camera is in front of her with her legs spread, and it's facing right at her crotch. And then with her leotard, yes, and then she gets down, and she's very flexible, and she can get all the way down to the floor, and she's looking at the camera. And I just thought, and I said, boy, oh boy, I said, what kind of logic was going into that? You know what I mean? Like, okay, little girl, we're gonna go ahead and get you down here, and we're gonna go ahead and record your crotch for a second. To me, I felt that I like how you said that was unsettling, and I said, well, what's that about? What, you know?
Yeah, and she was supposed to be 8 in the movie. She was at least 12.
Yeah,
in real life, but still, man.
And a good actress too, by the way. We should say that. I felt she was.
Oh, I thought she was great.
Yeah. In fact, I kind of, as you were talking about Omen and stuff, I was thinking about, kids that I like in movies where they're creepy or they're bad guys, like The Good Son, and other movies like that where they're the bad guys. Yeah. And I thought, she's actually up there for me because on the one hand, some movies like Omen wouldn't have been so good if they had this girl's sense of humor. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't think that it would have done good, but she was funny. And I felt like, man, I was actually surprised when I went later to IMDb to say, well, what else did she do? To find out that she didn't do anything. And she's she's gorgeous. She's a pretty girl who beautiful smile. And when she got older, she's a gorgeous woman right now. Absolutely stunning. It looks like she was a cheerleader of some kind.
She was. She was a cheerleader for the Atlanta football team, Falcons.
Wow. Well, unsurprising. I mean, as I said, just physique is just off the charts. So, and as I said, a stunning smile, right? Real heartthrob. So I was surprised that she just never. After that, it was just no. And it didn't sound like there was like an animus. Like it was nothing that was like, I don't like it, or it was bad or anything like that. Right. It just kind of was the way those cookies crumbled.
So overall, man, what'd you think of The Visitor from 1979?
Part of me, because, I was really critical, but I also enjoyed it. And I felt like there was a guy, Jordan Cronk, over at slantmagazine.com. He said, this is grindhouse gentrification. The Visitor is unique in that while it fails in most every traditional respect with regard to narrative clarity or construction, it does not fall short as either entertainment or as a piece of craftsmanship. In fact, it excels at both. And as a result, it endures as one of the era's most indefinable, inconceivably progressive pieces of cinematic nonsense. And I thought, that's legit. Like, I agree with that. The story
sums it up.
Yeah. So I would say, a 3 would be that it's entertaining for us. That's that we were entertained. I watched the whole thing. I don't want to say 3.5, but I will go a little bit above that because there are friends of mine that I really would say, dude, this nonsense is worth your time. Right. Yeah. And not all my friends are going to say, mother effer, I want my money back. So yeah, I would say like a 3.2. Let's give it a 3. I give it a 3.2. What about you, man? What do you give this thing?
There you go.
Yeah. What do you give this, man?
I give it a solid 3. What you just read of that review pretty much sums it up. It's just it's a chaotic mess, but it's entertaining, and there's plenty to point and laugh at, but still appreciate what they were trying to do. I didn't hate the music. I do wonder if they stripped the entire movie of that music and they replaced it with like modern music, kind of like they did with Cabinet of Dr. Caligari a while back, and they replaced the music, it makes me wonder if the movie wouldn't have had a completely different tone. Because when the music came on, it had the exact opposite effect of what it was probably going for, at least for me. Yeah. It was like canned laughter. that music would kick on, and it was just that was my cue. It's time to laugh and roll my eyes. So, but yeah, I was entertained.
Yeah.
And I give it a 3. It's a movie that, again, I'm not gonna, unless somebody's like, hey, you got anything outrageous that's from the 70s that's really off the wall, and I'd be like, yes, I do have. Yeah. I've got a perfect 5 for you here if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Dude, I actually, it was funny because we always have this thing at the end where we talk about the moral,
Yes.
And, we, because this was a double header, I was like, what's the moral of these stories and stuff? And honestly, man, I was going through it and I thought, I read something from somebody that really, to me, it really was the moral of this. And I think it was so good. And I said, part of me was like, man, maybe I could like word it myself. And I said, no, this is legit, man. Whitney Seibold over at whitneyman.wordpress.com said, if you try to sort it out, it can only lead to darkness, pain, and madness. If you sit zen-like meditating, then the madness can be staved off. Perhaps this film is an important step on your path to enlightenment. I thought it's true. If you approach this film and you're like, oh man, I'm going to try to figure it out. And I'm going to be all like, seeing exactly what's going on and read between the lines. You are going to be a very depressed person. It's going to lead to a very terrible night for you. Maybe even a couple terrible weeks. But if you just let it in, and you say whatever's coming at me, bam, 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 I'm just going to roll with it and take from it what it is. Kind of like Winnie the Pooh going down the river on a blustery day and stuff like that on a little leaf floating around. If you do that with this movie, you'll be okay. In fact, you may be better for it.
Yes. And in the meantime, if any old man comes to your door saying, hey, I'm your new babysitter, you'll probably not let him in and have him watch your 8-year-old daughter.
Oh my gosh, dude. Yes. It is. That is the moral, bro. That is it. 1,000 times. Amen. And again, I say amen.
All right, man. Well, thanks for listening to our double feature. Make sure to, like, share, subscribe, reach out to us. You can reach us at PaleoCheeze, that's cheese with a Z, at gmail.com. We've got Instagram pages, Facebook, Twitter, all that trendy social media stuff that you can check out and make us feel special and validate our decisions that we make in the movie reviews. And we'd love to hear from you. And again, thanks for checking out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.
Every person's story has something to teach us. How others view life, how obstacles are overcome, how joy is felt, how fears are faced, how love is expressed. The Matters of Faith podcast explores individual stories of people's lives and how faith plays a part. It may not be your story, but it may help shape yours.
The Matters of Faith podcast with Jay Wilburn is on Project Entertainment Network.